Or so you a friend of mine. Well, yeah, thanks, Eli, for like coming by. I'm really excited. This is the first episode of the Bandwidth Project, and as you read from some of the stuff that I've written, the kind of concept is just to like have discussions about artists, where you come from, your story, what you're trying to build, and it's all kind of like started from coffee shops, right? We've talked so many
I
times.
know.
And every single time I feel like I end up in these like hour-long conversations that have so uh truly like changed how I view myself as an artist and benefited how I'm spending time and structuring my life. And so, yeah, I guess this project is just a hope that I can have those conversations, record them, and then in the hopes that like even if one person is positively impacted by it, that's like really the only goal. And if it's many more, I would be thrilled. But yeah, it's kind of that's the baseline. So
Yeah,
I just want to
thanks
say,
for having me
yeah,
here.
that's what's up. So I guess to start, if you could, if you want to introduce yourself, kind of so that people can get to know who you are and
Yeah,
like that.
my name's Eli. I'm an artist, multi-creative, production producer, and I have been in band almost 4 years. I grew up in Texas, Houston primarily. So I got introduced at an early age to community mindset. Houston has a big community-driven mindset because of like natural disasters and stuff. So that kind of like that's how I got gravitated towards community. And then as an artist, I've always just really loved my environment, just always seeking out like what things make me feel good. And yeah.
That's what's up. Yeah. And so, could you talk about like the medium that you're choosing? For my knowledge, I actually don't know like what beyond painting, like what you're using as far as the um oh my gosh, what's the word? Oils and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do acrylics
Cool.
and I do mixed medium as well with plaster. And sometimes I'll use like concrete or just kind of be scrappy.
That makes sense. How did you end up or like choosing painting as a medium, or did you choose it? Was that a conscious choice?
It was a conscious choice. I just did not know it would reveal another level of artistic expression. I started in 2020 when COVID hit and everybody was like baking bread, and I've just never been a baker. So, but I love using my hands. So I've always like built furniture or refurnished or painted walls. Interior design is how I initially got involved in art.
Cool.
But during COVID, I got bored remodeling or like restyling, redecorating my house. So I was like, I'm going to find something new. So I bought a canvas and some paints and just started getting busy in my garage. And initially, I was just thinking I would make something pretty basic as far as something I'd want to hang in my house, like minimalist, abstract, neutral colors, like, Joanna Gaines back then or something. Yeah. But after a very short period of time of exploring, I realized that there was this whole internal world that I had this dialogue that was coming out into my art. And quite frankly, it scared the shit out of me. I didn't know that there was like graphics or illustrations in my mind where until I started seeing them on the canvas. And then there's one in particular that was maybe my second painting. My first one was just something very abstract and minimalist. And then I started just kind of seeing what would happen if I let my mind free. And the first painting that scared the shit out of me was this dancer inside of a basement, and then this house above with a door in the attic. And I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm gonna put that one away. Like, and then as I started like showing people, it was scary to show people like this is what came out of me. And it was amazing to hear what other people saw in the painting. And one friend pointed out that there was a ladder in the painting from the basement to the attic where the door was.
Oh, wow.
And there was. And so the dancer was here, the ladder, and then the door. And that was just like, oh, well, I didn't know what it meant then, but back then I knew it was like, that was my freedom, like getting up the ladder through the door. And it was very spiritual and kind of touched down on breaking free from this like religious past that I had some trauma from. So yeah, that was a big one.
That's fascinating. And so it kind of sounds like you didn't go and consciously say, I'm going to paint a dancer in a basement.
No.
And then it kind of just like emerged from your unconscious or something like this.
Yes, exactly. And I felt really, once I saw that happened, I knew deep down that I could not go and try to replicate anybody else's art or try to learn even from other people. I knew that I had to kind of see what came out of me instead of pour more in.
Whoa, yeah.
So even now, like there's a lot of books I want to read, but I just can't even grasp like more information I need to release. So part of my painting, and now I'm like, dang, I wish I would have like learned a little more skills. I'd be further along. But I have intentionally tried to not replicate what other people are doing because I know there's a story that's trying to evolve and come out. And it's been a huge process of even letting those stories stay on the canvas because they creep me out, like fairies and goblins, or like whatever I see. Like the scariest or funniest one that recently in the last, I guess, year and a half, I had this guy who kind of love bombed me and then didn't hear from him. And I knew what I was painting in that season was self-love. And this is where like the mystical creatures were coming into my art, and it was just like, oh gosh, now I'm an illustrator. Right. Like, and that's a whole nother skill set than just abstract minimalist. Right. But that another little creature that came through was the sex goddess on a swing. And like in a chariot swing, like in a tree. It's gonna be that's obviously one that has been challenging, self-love. So of course painting that one's going to be harder. But yeah, that one kind of creeped me out because it was like a lot of my sexual identity was coming through because the sex goddess had like a tongue lap. Oh, wow. You can edit this out.
I think a lot of it brings because it's relevant too, where it's like it seems like art in that way is that like like the unconscious like working through things in like the physical reality.
Yeah.
And it's interesting like because your response to it's almost like you're becoming aware of something that you're holding internally, regardless of like the specific, like details of what it is. And it's interesting, like, so as you're painting them, is it relatively like clear to you as it starts and you're like, oh, I know exactly what it's doing? Or does sometimes it take the whole painting to get to that place?
Oh yeah. It sometimes I'm like, oh, well, right now I'm painting Mount Jefferson. And I've tried to steer away from mountains and landscapes because it's like a saturated, market. And then like, I just really want to see what comes out of me. But even now, Mount Jefferson has been like a challenge in a physical sense where I feel like I'm physically, spiritually climbing this mountain because I'm painting these edges that are like scary they're risky edges, like if I were climbing it or painting it, I'm going to feel scared.
Right.
And so each painting that I've been working on has like an emotional expression that, like what you're saying, the feeling of depth that I might be going through emotionally is coming out into my paintings. And right now I'm painting layers and dirt and flowers and like creatures and all of that kind of goes back to how I feel like a layered individual, you know? So, um, yeah, each one has kind of revealed a personality trait in me or an emotion or a statement even.
Yeah.
So,
Do you feel like, are there things that like recur theme wise, or do you feel like it's constantly progressing in like learning about who you are?
I think both. Reoccurring images or themes seem to like nature just keeps coming through, but in an abstract way, almost like in a character way where there's like graphics that I'm like, well, I don't know how to make sense of this. Like, I don't know how people are going to read into this or see what it is. There's mystery there.
Right.
And I think staying true to keeping it a mystery for myself about the end product and also quitting when like I've like kicked myself in the butt so many times not quitting when I should have, when the story was there, and then I just over told it or overworked it, and then I'm like, well, now I have to reinvent that, you know.
Right.
And so some of the pieces take longer because of that, but
it's almost knowing when to stop.
Yeah, exactly.
What is are there any like markers to know when, or is it like this feeling and then sometimes you override it?
Oh, yeah. Oftentimes, like, I'll just get too involved where I'm like just detailing and trying to finish something when I should take a step back.
Yeah.
And even right now, with this painting of Mount Jefferson, it could have been done like a month ago, but I reworked it too many times and painted over it. And but now I've drawn these lines so many times that I'm like, oh yeah, this edge is no brainer. And I don't have that fear surrounding like drawing a line. And I had a friend recently ask me like, what scares me about drawing? And I'm just like, well, I'm not a great drawer. Like it's imperfect. So as a perfectionist, I like illustrations like a certain way. And when I see my like 12-year-old version of someone's, you know, like they've been doing it for a lifetime, I compare myself. So drawing that first line can be scary. And then I said like drawing it the 100th time can still be scary. It's just a matter of like, are you going to draw the line?
That's so interesting. And I guess I'm wondering about like the perfectionism that it plays it. Do you feel like that has, because you said it's 2020, do you feel like you wanted to be an artist prior to that? Or like, did you have artistic expressions? And was there a piece of like just taking the first step that played into like doing that first painting?
Yeah. Well, honestly, because I've always loved interior design and I've always used interiors as a sense of comfort. I didn't really know that that's what I was doing when I was a kid, rearranging my room or like setting up my dolls or, you know, whatever. I was rearranging them to have a sense of comfort. And aesthetics can absolutely change your brain. And it's like a matter of, you know, if your room's clean or if you have things organized, my brain needs a sense of order so that I have room to create. And so initially that's where it started, was decorating my room and helping other people decorate their homes. And I had an Airbnb, and I just think aesthetics can be really healing. And so then when COVID hit, I wanted to redecorate, and I wanted, like everybody was doing, like spending money on the inside of their homes and stuff, but I didn't have the money. And so because I'm scrappy, I was like, oh, well, I need art for my Airbnb that I was making. And so I just made some art for that. And then I was like, well, this is shit. Like I want to make something better. And then I started like playing around with plaster and a lot of texture. And my first piece of art was just like a minimalistic textural piece that has a lot of depth to it. and it's something I have hung up in my house, but that's kind of what spurred it, is that it's like, oh, I want new art, so I'm just gonna make it.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And it seems like, I wonder if that was a piece of it, was because being like in design, it almost became, it was less of like a sidestep and more of like a step forward into the right or something like this, to go from like designing other people's spaces to designing like your space being like the canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then being revealed that there's like this whole internal like story and canvas going on
Yeah.
that I was not expecting.
Yeah. Is that what motivates you to keep doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, painting is way harder than I thought. Like Bob Ross makes it look so easy. Like, I'm going to paint this whole landscape in an hour and you're going to like it. And I'm like, dude, slow down, because those edges are hard, and blending and everything is a technique, and there's a skill set like any creative process. But I wonder if I didn't have the internal story going on, if I would push through, because I can make easier art for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and it kind of had this idea of like, some of the most motivated people I know have, I guess we were talking about rock bottom, but have experienced like that, like tumultuous, whether it's like a big life event or just like an unstable job or like whatever it is. And it's interesting because it seems like especially the creatives that I know and have talked to that show up consistently for their practice, it's not, at least from what I've gathered, there's very few where it's this conscious, I really just want to show up. And it's like, seems more derived from like, I need to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am, like, internally, I'm a hermit crab, only in the sense of like, I enjoy working at home and like creating at home, but I'm also a people person, and most people are surprised that I like to be a hermit crab. But yeah, the consistently showing up in the craft, I know now it's just a part of my dedication to learning the skill and finishing. And because I have such an overwhelming amount of art in my vicinity, that I'm like, no, I can't hold on to this. This is not, I can't just get rid of it. Like, I'm, I am donating some pieces and everything, but I just feel that, when I'm surrounded by art, I know there's like a story behind it. And so if I can just share the lens that I have seen my story unfold, or the environment around me, I've been such an empath in my life that I just am very impacted by people's lives and people's stories and environments. So if I can have a small impact in how people see art or see a room or see anything, like visual arts is, for me, so healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And there's a reason that it's, unfortunately, it's not on these walls, but it's on, right? Like so many walls. And I guess, oh man, it kind of goes in two directions here. I think the first one, I kind of want to ask, what, I guess you kind of touched on it there, but a bit of the legacy that you would hope to leave, or what is your, not that you need like an ultimate goal as an artist, but I think we often have like this idealized version of what we want art and life to look like. Yeah, I'm curious what yours is.
Well, I think if I could leave a legacy, it would be to be kinder to ourselves and to let the internal dialogue be more about mystery and like kind of questioning, rather than making large statements and claims. I think I had a really negative self-perception of myself growing up, and like with criticism. So that really numbed me and kept me from being able to self-express, because I was like a people pleaser, and I wanted to make sure that if I put something out there, people would like it and that I would get good feedback. And now I just know that regardless if people like it, the right people will like it. You know, like it just matters if what I put out there helps, you know, one person or two, whatever it is. Like I can't put a number on things. I can't put an outcome on things. So, but as far as a legacy, I just feel like people can be more authentic to themselves. Like, and if I can help facilitate that in any way, like that changes my life. Like that helps me.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a reason that we, or like society, at least Western society, because that's what I've experienced and to speak to, like, do you think there's a reason that we don't live like more authentically? That's a hard, it's a hard thing to.
No, there's just so many layers there because like culturally there's a lot going on. And I think even no matter where you grow up, I think this is true, but I grew up in Texas. So even though, you know, Texas is big and there's loud people, but there's also like this underground tone of like, you know, kids need to be quiet and only speak if you're spoken to, or, you know, like we kind of had that ingrained in us from a young age, and our parents had that, you know, from their childhood. And just this level of being afraid to speak your mind or be loud, or for me, shake your booty, or like, you know, like I started dancing, and I realized that that was such a groundbreaking movement. Is such a big impact in my life because I wasn't allowed to take up space. So now I'm like, like, like taking up a lot of space here, like going to concerts, and I'm just like not scared about putting my body out there like I once was. And I'm derailing from the question, I think, but just the impact of self-expression and the freedom to be yourself and open up about what you care about, how you see the world, what you want to do. Like if you could start something, what would it be? So,
and that it can make a difference, not just for you. I think you speak that too as a piece of it. Like we kind of exist to a degree only because others can perceive us. And so it's this weird, like meta-conscious thing that happens that says, like, I'm only real because of my relationships. And this is like a certain branch of philosophy, but I think it's so relevant because it's saying, like, the art is, yes, for yourself. And like, if it can inspire literally one other person, right, that can be enough to change someone's life. And I don't know, there's so much.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
And also, you may not be the like vessel or engine for this one dynamic art piece or like whatever it is, but if I inspire somebody to open up about their expression, there's a possibility that person could find great success, or they can find internal happiness or peace, and like that's enough, you know. And being able to help people push forward in their life is like such a satisfying thing. Like helping others helps us.
How do you feel? Because I think I align with some of this belief in a lot of ways, but how do you feel that like your like helping others is helping yourself kind of thing, which is saying, like, how do you feel like by finding how to express yourself authentically?
Yeah. Well, because I grew up a helper, like I just to help take care of everybody, but I wasn't taking care of myself. And that's been why I started creating and expressing myself, because if I'm not taking care of myself, or we aren't investing in what makes us happy, then we're not truly able to take care of or help other people. And I think it's possible, but it's not long-term effective if you're not loving yourself. And because there's like this temptation to be a martyr and be like, oh, I'm helping everybody. But like, I'm not getting the love back, or, you know, whatever. That's because, and I experienced that because I didn't have enough self-love to be like, oh, I can help this person without expecting anything in return. And it still feels good.
Yeah, that makes sense. It reminds me of the metaphor of the glasses, right? Which is saying, like, if your glass is full, it's really hard to like help someone else like empty their glass or like this because you have too much on your plate to actually show up in a way that's like present and accounted for and kind, right? Because there's just too much going on. And that's been for me as well, like such an interesting journey of learning like what even like self-compassion is and can look like. Because yeah, growing up, especially in like a high, like when you're expected, really high expectations are held on you. It changes the way that you show up for the world because it's so much is about how others are perceiving you. And that's why it's so interesting to hear when it's flipped, which is saying, well, actually, how you perceive yourself and how you take care of yourself is like so impactful on how people perceive you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's a relatively new conversation
Lots
for me.
of layers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that because I was having that mentality of like being a helper, but not satisfied. And when you, like, we all project, we all are a reflection. And so I'm still figuring that out myself because I know in the sense of me learning how to open up and be more authentic and self-express, it's returning back to me in new ways where I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting that phone call, or I wasn't expecting a proposal from you. And now, like, just when you are clearly confident in who you are and you know your identity and you show up for yourself and you speak your truth, that's when, in my opinion, the universe takes care of you. And like, that's when your true self can even flourish more because you're like showing up for yourself. And I think how we had to navigate fitting in these boxes to be accepted and to have the careers that our parents wanted, or, the expectations of checking the boxes. Like, not all of us are meant to check those boxes, and we're supposed to be outside of the mold. And I think a lot of people are just beginning to realize, like, no, I don't want this career. I don't want to live here. I don't want this relationship. And then navigating how to change your life is also a whole commitment, and committing to saying, I'm going to do film, or I'm going to do painting or dance. Like, there's all a commitment level of making change that, as a little hermit crab, I'm like, oh, you want me to go talk to people?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's also how it's wild because that helps you define your identity, especially with how you can learn from other people. I'm curious how you got into dance because I think art and painting can to a degree be very like individual. Like you don't need anyone else to kind of like show you what to do or this or that. It seems like dance is maybe a little different for you.
Well, I'm just starting to challenge myself with dancing with other people. But initially, it was really just me in a very vulnerable season of not knowing how to emotionally handle what was happening in my life. And so painting definitely helped in that regard. But there was so much stored energy in my body where I was just like raging with, like, what do I do with all of this, or grief? And I just kind of tapped into this, I don't know, kind of like indigenous or tribal effect of being like, well, music and dancing is like such a healing motive. And I think I literally would just shake my body or shake my booty and feel like, what am I feeling when I move? And it is so vulnerable, especially because I'm a woman, curvy, and like showing up, shaking my butt is not something that like I was encouraged to do as a young youth, but like I was influenced as a young girl growing up in Texas by the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and like their level of perfection and dancing. And like, even I see some of my influence in my moves are like influenced by that. And just like Beyonce, like, how could I not want to shake my butt? Or just, yeah, I think that there's just a lot of levels of how we can heal ourselves. And it just kind of depends on where you're willing to play.
Yeah.
And like, what you're willing to do, like get your hands dirty or explore something where you're not sure what's going to be at the end of it, or um yeah, I does that
No, I was
yeah.
it's fascinating because I know I have done a lot the like psychology side of the world, and especially like somatic therapies and stuff like this are so fascinating to me. And one of the like statistics, and I have to fact check this to make sure that it's right, but I think it's something like if you just jump like up and down for like 8 minutes, that it's like a way to reset basically your nervous system. And I learned that when I was kind of wild. I think I learned it when I was like 15 or something.
Wow, that's cool.
But I never really paid much attention to it. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but cool, right? And I think so much of that has come back around to understanding of like, oh, like taking control of our own reset, right? Like taking back your power to say, I'm going to like release this energy, move through it, kind of find ways to express it. Like that is the level of like care to oneself, because you're learning like the tools and tactics to, I guess maybe that's like a level of adulting that I see where it's like no longer in someone else's hands, and you're saying like, no, this is actually healing.
Yeah, and whatever it is, like bicycling or hiking or whatever sport, or it's just whatever you enjoy that can help you reset your nervous system. And I think we never really knew that we could even do that until like recently. There's more attempts for healing naturally, and but yeah, I've just going back to the question with dancing, being at home was like such a safe place for me to be sexy, to do whatever I want, to try to do the splits and not be embarrassed. You know? But then I knew there was a certain level of discomfort I would have to face to go dance in public with my friends, or like go to a class and like dance with people I admire who I know are better dancers than me. And just really letting go of that comparison of having to show up and move or create or like compare yourself to another person. And then just being like, for me, it's so important to being creating environments where maybe there's like some competition, but it's not like the kind of competition where we're like leveling each other up. It's just like, wow, I'm like, your talent inspires me and I want to be better at my talent. And like, but then when I've realized a lot of people in my life right now, our dreams are overlapping and some of our talents are overlapping. And it's just been such a beautiful experience to have a community where we're like, oh, you like that thing? I like that too. Let's do it. Let's go. And it's like collaborative and, just thinking about how we've always been told, like, if you need to be independent and we've all, like you need to show us what you're worth on your own. And like, I'm kidding, but, not really, you know, like I've realized that there's on a higher level, this interdependence where it's like, well, there's a collective of us who care about this or we like this, and we can help each other resource things or, you know, build things. And that kind of atmosphere is where I have just really thrived in, where we maybe, we're all independent in a certain level, but in our own way, we have like different skill sets that really help the collaboration.
Yeah. It was fascinating. I think it reminds me of I'm gonna butcher this quote because I always do. I have this thing where I like can say quotes just like slightly off, but the meaning's still there. You know,
me too.
The concept is like you go fast alone, but you go far together, and it's really interesting. Like deconstructing. I think at large, like Western society, we like have this concept of like rugged individualism, and especially in like entrepreneurship and when art and entrepreneurship intersect. And it's been interesting to try and like deconstruct what that actually means and saying, well, there is really no such thing as doing something alone.
Yeah.
And like the balance of, how do you find people that are collaborative versus, because some people really do like believe in that like individualistic perspective where they're just like, by all means, I'm just going to get my ends. yeah, do you want to speak to like that collaborative nature in that way anymore?
Yeah, I do. I want to make sure I have the question right. But as far as like how important it is for collaboration,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or like, and maybe some like personal experience of like times when like collaborating has, or you didn't want to collaborate or something and choosing to like opened up more possibility.
Let me think about that. Mm. Yeah, I think painting, because it is such an individualistic concept where you're like, well, this is my art, this is my painting. And since living here in Bend, I've met so many painters, and I'm like, wow, you're incredible. Your talent, your skill is beyond me. And there could have been like a level of jealousy or competition, because there's only so many galleries and coffee shops in town, like, but instead of having that mentality, I have just chosen to really learn from people who've been doing it longer and ask them questions and how I paint snow, or that's what I'm dealing with, like painting glass and snow. It's
Wow.
technique.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm like calling up my friend Michelle, like, or just people that also want to collaborate, who don't find art to be competitive. It's like self-expression. And so I think it's just a matter of finding your tribe and finding the right people who understand that when we do things together, we can get further. And I'm tired of just the rat race and like trying to keep up with everybody, because it's exhausting. And I'm getting my foot daily, trying to find where I fit in on socials or in my business, like where to take the next steps. And I think if we can have a mindset of collaboration, like learning from each other and like, oh, like, how did you get into that space, or like just being accepting questions and asking questions, I think is like such a big, vulnerable and authentic thing that we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting in there. I think you kind of mentioned socials. And I'm wondering how that plays into all of this because it's a relatively unprecedented, I guess it's, when was Instagram like released? Like 2015 or something? Yeah. I don't want to say a number, but that might be so wrong. But it's in the grand scheme of things. It's like been a while, but it's also pretty recent, right? And I wonder how does social media play a role in your art, in your business, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that I'm a guru on social media whatsoever, because it's just constantly changing. And if I spend all of my time trying to figure out the algorithms or like what people want to see, I really lose my creative development. And what I'm processing right now is like, well, I'm finishing this art, but I also need to be posting on Instagram so that when I'm finished with the art, people will see it and like come to my show or, whatever it is. There's always going to be this aspect, I think, for me that like, am I doing enough on social media? And I guess the answer would be probably not. Like, unless I'm posting every day with the right hashtags and like, but accepting that I don't need to go viral. I don't need to have 100,000 followers. If that happened, good. Like epic, I receive. Like, of course, I'm investing for a hopeful outcome. But I had to accept that if I put myself out there and I'm not received, or if I don't get the likes, like, am I still going to do it? And the answer is yes. And there's this story that I've read my children so many times called Mole Music. And it's about this mole who is isolated underground. He's lonely. And so he buys a violin and he spends like 6 months trying to learn this violin. He's just like, oh, it sounds awful. Like nobody's ever going to want to listen to me. And all along, he's his home is under a tree. And since he has consistently played the violin, all these people started hearing it and gathering around the tree, and there would be like different wars even, and like it would stop a war or something. He had no idea the impact that he was having above ground when people were listening to him play violin.
Wow.
And that recently just came back into my field because I have kind of thought that in my trauma, I was kind of like living under the ground, like not really wanting to show myself. Or so initially, I kind of thought I was like a frog. Like I could go like underground or in the water. And but being able to have different perspectives, like you may not know who you're impacting ever. You may just have to be doing what you're doing. And I think so many artists before us, that's what they did. They had no idea that their art would go and change generations and like have such a huge impact. And that's why I feel so thankful to be an artist in this time, because I do have the potential to reach a lot of people in my lifetime.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be like the old saying, like, artists usually are famous after they die. And like, that's because they didn't have the resources.
Yeah.
And like now we have resources. And I think there's just a lot of potential. We just get to tap into it and see what happens.
Absolutely. Especially at no cost. I think that's the opportunity that I see so greatly. And we talked about it a little bit before, but it's this concept of like the difference between like an incredible artist and a like traditionally successful one monetarily is good marketing. Right. And it's interesting, like talking about social media, because I think for a large degree it gets demonized. And I do think that it can be, the doom scroll is so real and it can be harmful. And it can also be a tool, right? But it's interesting because to be not just a consumer, but a creator on those platforms, it is a kind of unprecedented reach for like the cost of time, as far as that goes. Because it is wild. You can build a platform that has 100,000 followers, right? And every post you put out, gets, I don't know, 50,000 views, 100,000 views, million views, whatever it is. And that sort of reach, it kind of becomes that question of like, who are you doing it for? And what's your intention behind doing it? And I think it is powerful for what you're saying, which is when you're putting stuff out there, you try your best, and you can tell me if I'm misunderstanding, but you're trying your best that the post is just authentic. Like it's just in integrity.
Yeah. It's for you.
Yeah. And like in that, like you're not chasing trends, because that becomes inauthentic.
Yeah, that hits me because as I've been like strategizing how I build my social media, I've never felt aligned like, oh, well, there's a trend. I'm going to copy this dance trend and I'm going to do this. And, like chasing the waves doesn't suit me. So I think being authentic to like my voice and what we want to say may not be what's trending, but it is authentic. And there's a lot of people out there who want authentic over trending. And I think that's just what I'm meant to do. You're meant to do. Like just we don't need to keep up with the Joneses anymore. We've realized that doesn't work and that doesn't make us happy. So like breaking the mold of what we want to share.
Yeah.
And, we don't know where it could go. We Absolutely. Just go with what happens.
It's interesting. I wonder, in that, do you like market to sell any of your artwork? It sounds a lot like a lot of it is personal. And you mentioned like donating it or giving it away. Is that a part of your platform at all?
Selling. Oh yeah. Cool. I'm definitely wanting to sell my art. It's been only about 2 years since I've really consistently painted, and I was donated all these canvases, and they've just been really exploring what my style or what I have to say on my canvas has been really hard and frustrating. But now I am getting to the point where I'm showing it at a local coffee shop here in town, Lone Pine. I rather know the value of putting work into something and letting it sit there and risk looking like a failure, but knowing my value, that the right person one day will understand the value.
Yeah.
And I've definitely like had a show 2 years ago where I just like put a price tag on it that I thought people would buy it for. And I was making art for what I thought people would buy. And it was so unsatisfying. And I didn't sell anything. And I just knew like, well, okay, well, that didn't go the way I wanted it. And I think failure is such a huge part of the creative process, and allowing failure to move you forward and learn from your experiences. And well, I didn't like this. And, you know, like that didn't really have a lot of impact. So yeah, I'm in this for the monetary
end game, right?
Yeah.
Of course. And it's fascinating, the piece of that where it becomes like this interesting, it's the same piece of art, right? And one person will look at it and say, cool, anyone can do that, right? Which is, it's something. And someone else will look at it and like cry, right?
Yeah.
And like have an emotional release looking at it. And to that person, for whatever reason that it connects, become the worth, right? If we put a monetary value on it, becomes much higher.
Yeah.
And like, do you have any, like, it's a strange concept for me, because I'm like, well, what is it that allows it to be more valuable to someone else? Do you think that's like a value system or a personal experience? Does that question make sense?
No, yes. I'm trying to still grasp it as I answer, but something came up when you were asking. Like, for me, this seems strange, but graffiti is like something valuable because I am seeing someone rebel and express themselves in a way that's like a little risky. And that's how I feel about putting anything out there. Is like, it's a little risky. And, but there's like a perceived value of art, you know, and there's like having a dot on a wall that costs $1 million. Like, cool, I could paint a dot. Like, you want to buy my art? But like, my value comes from like what I feel within, and being able to like silently express that is so invaluable to me, because right now I don't want to share vocally how I feel about the past, or, you know, like, so like dancing and painting lets me express it without feeling uncomfortable. I mean, painting, I mean, there's a discomfort sharing in these things, but way more fun than like crying and or having conversations around like, this feels too much, you know. I just does that answer?
No, I'm okay. And it is weird because it kind of spins me on a different train of thought, because you know, like EMDR as a therapy.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I was just listening to this conversation, and it was talking about like EMDR, the therapist never actually has to hear you verbally express your trauma. At least this is like this one, I forget, I wish I knew the name to give them credit, but that you can process trauma without verbally expressing it. And it's so interesting. I think at least I, to some degree, put so much value on the affirmation of someone else's perception of my words, which is saying like my trauma or my experience or this, even my, you know, opinion or perception of a situation is only valid when I say it to someone else. And it's really interesting kind of getting into that side of things where that's kind of a false belief system. And it's saying,
they're relying on their opinion.
Right. Which is wild, because when you take power back like that, and it's saying like, non-verbally, you're expressing your emotions through art. And I don't know, to me that's so interesting, because you look at like the emotional spectrum of like frustration and anger and stuff like this, and I think of like, wow, we've normalized like when you're frustrated with someone, I think a lot of people are comfortable like being in like an argument with someone. And it's not that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it's saying that there's other options to move through stuff like that, or like emotions in general that aren't necessarily with the person that it directly relates to.
Yeah, because you're not guaranteed closure or like sharing verbally is vulnerable, and it may not have like the outcome. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting mixed up in my all ideas, but I just think that there's so many ways we can express ourselves. And I think that's what you were getting back to is like, I think we've been taught that we need to verbally process, and that's good to do if you have a safe friend or family member or therapist. I'm so thankful for talk therapy and my EMDR, and just like trying things that make a difference. I think just trying things makes a difference. Like knowing what suits you and what doesn't. And yeah. Sorry, my brain just
No, it's. I think it was a bit of a convoluted question, but I think maybe that's the heart of it all, which is saying you kind of just have to feel like I'm like a professional spaghetti thrower,
yeah,
right? Which is like see what sticks, yeah. And I in that where it's some people do process really well verbally, and then some people don't, right? And some people process with visuals and with music, and it's fascinating to me because I being in the like art scene here and knowing so many people, and there's a degree where it's like, man, like how many of us really chose the form of expression that we're moving towards, right? Which is saying, like, in all honesty, like I didn't like intentionally build. I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna grab my camera and like this is gonna be now my like artistic pursuit.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I loved that question that you on the prep, but just like I had no idea I would be pursuing this as a career when I was in my garage painting a house. Like, and even like after I realized that it was bigger than I wanted, it became bigger than I wanted it to be, because there's like a level of safety and staying small and not sharing and not putting myself out there is like, well, I can stay comfortable here. But actually, I'm really uncomfortable staying here. And there's all this building up inside of me. And if I don't share, if I don't express, if I don't give this talent away, then I have anxiety and I have depression, and like not feeling seen is part of that staying small.
Yeah.
And putting myself out there recently and like sharing how I feel or sharing what I want to give to others. It's vulnerable and it makes me sick to my stomach and it makes me have anxiety, but it's like a different type of anxiety. It's like one that has some excitement behind it instead of the dread. And like, I think we can get easily caught up in, well, like comparing ourselves, like, well, they're doing it. And I don't know if I can compare, like, I don't want to compare myself, or like starting something is hard because then you might have to commit to it.
What makes it worth committing to?
I think the satisfaction of knowing this is something I'm meant to do. And if it's paying off, that's not the end goal. The end goal is like, am I staying true to myself? Am I expressing myself for myself and not for anybody else? And I think that's worth it, to prove to myself I love myself enough to pursue this. And if it goes off well, great. If it doesn't, like, what's next?
How will you know?
Ugh. If it's worth it?
Yeah. Or if it's working.
I think the internal path of like, do I feel content? Do I feel I'm showing up? And that's worth it. And I think I've lived with so much anxiety knowing I wasn't showing up for myself, and the discontent that I was feeling, being small, being afraid. I knew I've always known I was talented. I knew I was an artist, but like letting the people who are more talent or more skill set like intimidate me to stay small. So I just think we can't really put a monetary value, or like, that wasn't your question, but just like what makes it valuable is how you feel. And if you feel like this is right. Yeah.
Have you always been in tune with that like feeling of rightness, like or like intuition? And if not, has it, what has the process been like to develop that?
Whew. I think I've, ever since I was a little girl, like picked up on my environment, and like I was in tune to other people's emotions, and it's trauma. But just in the last couple of years, I've really realized, okay, well, I don't need to pick up everybody else's energy. I don't need to be in tune about what people think if people accept me. I just need to accept myself. And yeah, that's even like triggering as I say it, because I'm like constantly developing that skill and showing up for things that scare me. And yeah, I think that's how I know I'm on the right path.
Yeah. Do you have any practices? Because in my experience, meditation has been really fascinating in allowing myself to get quiet, to be more in tune. Because I think we all, maybe this is a broad stroke, but I would argue that most, maybe all people, it's a good question to like, see what that would be, have that voice of intuition or like judgment. And I think for me, also in the like perfectionist, I kind of like didn't pay attention to it. And then in getting quiet through meditation have built more of that sense of knowing, or the ability to connect to it, maybe more fluidly or something like this. Do you have any practices that help you to be, I guess maybe it would be called like centered in that?
Well, I will say that meditation is like a skill set that I'm still developing. And I really admire when people can sit contemplatively with their thoughts and like breath work and all of that, because I'm just like pretty high energy gal, and it's like hard for me to sit here without so yeah, I would say dancing has definitely pushed me to open up more, and where I feel the level of discomfort in my body, it kind of triggers an emotion where I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And I feel like meditation is like that too. Like you get to a certain point where you're like, where do I go? What do I do? And I just, yeah. So for me, it's kind of a physical and a mental push. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe to that degree, it's a level of like flow state. It's interesting I've had so many conversations about meditation, and that sometimes it's actually not helpful or beneficial to sit because of the way where we're at in the journey of processing, especially the past and trauma and stuff like this, and that more active pursuits that have that like somatic connection are in some degree like healthier, because they're allowing like the energy to actually like move or flow.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, because someone's mind might not be safe to meditate for too long. And it is about quieting the mind, but sometimes like for me to quiet the mind, I have to get out the energy. And I think we're all designed differently. And I think it's beautiful when I have my friends who can like hang out for 20 minutes just with their self. Very admirable. But I'm wired different, and it's a skill for me to rest myself in that way. Like I can develop that more. But I think the main thing is whatever we find joy doing, whatever we find peace doing, that's where we can lean in. And that is like, we can find different meditative expressions that are not just like one thing. And like, oh, well, this person found it through that. Like, I must do it through yoga, or, like, no, just like find it through what makes you happy. And like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. I think this is a core belief of mine that there's enough space for everyone to pursue the thing that brings them joy. And there's right for everyone to be in that zone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think there's a degree of maybe that like, why me? Or like, well, there's too many people in the field that are doing it, or like, is there a niche for me or something like this? And I think what I'm hearing you say is like that none of that matters.
Yeah.
It's just like if you enjoy it and it like upholds your moral standards or something like this, then like do it, try it, see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it leads to this concept of like, how has pivoting, or have you had to pivot? Have you tried things that don't work, run into a wall and pivot from that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have like any examples or like in particular?
Well, I guess just career wise, like, well, you knew I was working for a local restaurant.
Yeah.
I was offering social media management, and I did a really good job creating quality content, storylining, but I am not a content calendar strategist. Like, I don't want to go in and do the software and, have everything planned out. I like the strategy and the consulting and the direction. And that was it. I got fired from that job because I wasn't organized on the social media planning side. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a long story, but I have been fired a couple times where I'm like, well, that did not work. And whoa, my level of confidence just got blown. And there's a degree of not wanting to get back up. Mm-hmm. And knowing when something doesn't work that means so much to you, like, how do you pivot from that?
Yeah.
And for me, I just knew, well, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I just did it anyway because I wanted to get paid. And like, in the grand scheme, I thought it was going to work towards doing what I really want to do, which is art direction, production, painting, dancing, like you kind of make sacrifices sometimes thinking like that's what's going to get you to where you want. Mm-hmm. But if it's not like in alignment with you, I think it's really hard to get where you want. Mm. And if you don't ethically align yourself with the environment that you believe in and how people are treated or how you're treated, I think that in the past I've accepted less for myself because I thought like, oh, I need this.
Yeah. And sometimes you do, right? Sometimes you need the paycheck.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity on the table.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've also had a couple of situations or like jobs where it wasn't my strong suit, it wasn't my skill set. Mm-hmm. And even doing a decent job, it was so clear that it wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. I think there's a level of eventually it'll fall apart kind of thing because it's not
meant for you.
Not meant for you. Mm-hmm. And I guess the biggest piece, because it's been such a great learning for me over the past couple of years, but like what's the process of getting back up look like? Because it can be quite a blow either to like your self-confidence or esteem or even your like desire to work in an industry when someone says like you don't meet the standards. Mm-hmm. Right. And yeah, what is that process for you like?
I think that's a great question. And it just kind of, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's just like, are you doing it for you? Mm-hmm. Are you doing it for them?
Yeah.
And are you showing up to show them what you're worth? Or are you showing up to show you what you're worth? Mm-hmm. And for me, I've like showed up to like, well, I'm good. Like, I want you to see how good I am. Mm-hmm. But honestly, my full potential is like still out there. And so the more I show up for myself, I'm like, well, things happen unexpectedly, or that went better than I thought it would. And I think failure is such a part of the process. And I have been like in sales most of my life. So I've gotten a lot of rejection, and I've just had a lot of like rejection in life, I feel. And that I think is deemed as a bad thing, but it's really what has pivoted me forward into this resilience of, I don't really care if I'm accepted anymore. And I don't care if you like it. And of course, I want you to like it. Like, if you don't, then I'm not going to take it personally that it's my fault. It's my problem. It's like, well, we all have our own taste buds. And if you don't like it, then like, you don't need to.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a degree of, you also have to know who you are in order to like hold fast confidently to saying like, okay, like if this isn't for you, then that's okay.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's a big piece of this resilience you're talking about, which is saying as you get to know yourself better, it makes it almost easier to a degree to handle rejection because you know who you are.
Yeah. And if you're showing up just like creating things for other people, then it's probably already been done before. And those people who maybe not like what you're doing, it just because they're not open-minded enough to see something new. And I think that's why we have to keep moving forward past rejection, or just showing up authentically with the art that we want to bring out, is ultimately going to push the edge. It's going to be the new thing. It's really the people who put out things that are vulnerable that push the envelope. And if we just create what's already been done or acceptable, then it's just pretty vanilla and bland and doesn't really make for a movement.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating because it's almost like that. I think we see so many movements born out of this, someone saying something that was in friction with like the status quo. And I don't know, I have so much respect for that, where it's saying like, I don't want to follow trends. Like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, not out of the hopes to make a trend, but because it's what's authentic. Yeah. And that's
what feels good.
Yeah. Which is fascinating because you can't, in that way, you can never really, and that's why I love these conversations where it's like, it's just trying to understand an artist's perspective more, because every single person is coming at it from a different angle because of their set of experiences and life and where they grew up and their family and friends and, all the media that they consume. So at the end of the day, it's fascinating because I don't know if anyone feels what's right exactly the same as someone else.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah. I don't actually know.
No, I don't think we do. Yeah, you're right. And
there's no way to know, at least.
Yeah. And then I think that kind of crosses over to having similar passions as others, similar talents, where like I ran into artists that were at like the street festivals here in Bend where I'm like, oh, your art feels like too much like my art. And like, I'm like, wait, how did you get to this like perspective? Or, there's always going to be someone out there to compare yourself to, or, question like, am I authentic enough? Like, am I different enough? And I just think that mentality has to be I hope it dies off, because it doesn't matter if we are like similar. I think that's what brings us closer together. Like we've always, focused on our differences. And I think being able to focus on the similarities is such a gift, because then we can really be like, oh, well, this person is like me. And that is really comforting.
Yeah.
And like, I feel seen, I feel more loved because I see this kind of quality in someone else.
Yeah, it's like, it's an interesting balance. It's the willingness to be different, and also to the willingness to accept that you're different isn't as different to some people as you might think. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, it almost like being the rebel. There's a bunch of other people out there that are also being a similar type of rebel.
Yeah.
Whether that's through like your artistic or your movement or something like this.
Yeah. Well, we've always been taught to be like independent and, be different. And I think that being different is good. That's a good quality. But it's not what it's like the main thing that's going to bring us together. Like if we're focused on being different.
Yeah.
But yeah, all to say, like, I want everybody's creative freak flags to fly and like, yeah, let's show how different we are because that shows us the expansion of our backgrounds and stories and how we relate to each other. And my story is different from somebody else's story, even if I think like, you know, I think it's easy to get caught up and think like, oh, well, I can't do this because of my trauma, or like, I can't do this because of my family background. You know, there's always going to feel like limitations. And I think showing up for ourselves and not thinking about the outcome has been the most like brave thing I could do because I'm not tied to a certain expectation or success or yeah.
No, it makes sense. I guess I'm wondering in that, do you have any like piece of advice that you would give or you'd want someone that's like listening, um, you'd like want to tell them or like encourage them to hear that's like maybe questioning if they should step into what they feel called to do?
Yeah, I would just say to go for it, to step into what you have. Like, if there's a desire in you to do something, usually that desire doesn't go away. It will dormant, or like you're like, I'll put it on the back burner. Usually that just turns into anxiety or depression, or I'm just learning about like, you know, how our body stores information and emotions and creativity. Like if we don't allow ourselves to explore creativity or a new career or going back to school, usually it just kind of stays there. And my experience is not helpful. And so just not being tied to, oh, if I try something, it needs to be a success. Or if I learn like to draw, it needs to look good. And I've had feedback on my drawing where I'm like, ouch. Like, but yeah, it's just about having that freedom to try something and be brave, even if it doesn't go the way that you wanted or the outcome. And accepting that and then go to the next thing, you know? And I think it's such a privilege to be able to do that. And I found that it's definitely helped my mental health. It's helped my success. It's just staying authentic to what's that desire? Why do I have that dream? Why, since I was a kid, why did I want this thing, you know? And just really tapping into that childlikeness. And, you know, kids, they play, they're just like so imaginative and they make noise and they're, you know, a little crazy. And I would just suggest to tap into that child and allow that child to breathe and be like, oh, I can say this. Oh, I can move. I can paint. I can get behind a lens, you know, like whatever it is, we all have the, I guess, right to really tap into ourselves and not feel like we need to hide ourselves anymore. And I feel like we've been told to do that and I'm over it. So
absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. It's like the courage to act.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
to take a risk. Is so beautiful. Yeah. Is there anything that you like want to touch on that we haven't like discussed yet? Is there anything?
I mean, I can't think of anything. Cool. I feel like we could just keep talking, but no, I feel like, let me think real fast. Can't think of anything.
Cool. Oh, I guess do you want to maybe give a shout out to like where people can find your work, your platforms? And I know you mentioned your stuff hanging in Lone Pine coming up soon. Do you want to say the dates for that? Yeah.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Eli Be 123, and I have my show starting March 1st at Lone Pine downtown. And I will also be doing a live event, live performance March 14th from 5 to 8. So I'll be painting alongside a band with some live music. So I'm really excited about that, to be having my art on the walls and painting at the same time. Just feels like so dreamy. And then I have a website coming soon. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited. This time passed so quickly.
Yeah, I know.
But to dive into it and hear, your experience. And so thank you so much.
Thank you, Sage. This was awesome. I'm excited to see where it goes. And
Me too.
it's going to take off.
I hope so.